Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Seduction of a Duke by J.R. Salisbury, narrated by Mary Sarah. 1. Lady Cora Keats rose alongside her father, the Duke of Dover. Together they eagerly watched his racehorse, St. Elmo's Fire, take the lead. He roared past his competition with ease, as his magnificent, well-muscled back form carried him ahead by 4 lengths. Gentlemen began to shout, even though the race was far from over. Cora's enthusiasm was addictive. Thoroughbred horses were in her blood. For her, it wasn't just about the possibility of winning. To Cora, winning was secondary. It was all about these magnificent creatures, watching them blossom from wobbly foals to training and on to racing. Leaving her father's side and making her way to the rail, she stood at the edge. As she leaned forward over the rail, a large, flashy chestnut began to challenge her stallion. Oh, hell no! This would never do. Whoever this was, he'd better have stamina, because her horse had racing in his blood, with the endurance and speed of 3 horses. She began shouting, "Come on! Come on! Move your bloody arse!" Not one to lose. St. Elmo's Fire made his way to the finish line in a second burst of speed, leaving the chestnut several lengths behind. Smiling, she turned to find her father, watching her from the edge of the box, a stern look on his face. Her gaze turned back to the rest of the boxes and found a gentleman with wavy dark hair, the colour of ink, watching her. His skin appeared bronzed from the sun. Too bad he wasn't closer, so she could get a better look at him. She loved the track at Sandown Park. Located in Surrey, it was an easy ride from their London home. The course itself was fast, and if she ever had a hunter ready for racing, this was the perfect course to start one on. Cora got so absorbed in the race she forgot herself and who her father was. Words would fly from her mouth that she normally only used at the farm in Scotland. Lanarkshire was located not far from Edinburgh, in the Scottish lowlands. The castle, appropriately named Keats Castle, had been in the family for over 400 years. It was where Cora had spent most of her childhood, and where she fell in love with horses. At the tender age of 4, she was given her first pony. From there, she was a constant figure in the stables. If she wasn't riding, she was asking questions to the grooms or stablemaster. Her first racer had been a hunter named Lancelot. A white thoroughbred, he was quick and nimble, especially going over the walls and fences throughout the estate. By then, her father indulged her when she approached him at age 15 about training a 3-year-old piebald named Moya, omitting the small fact that she was going to train him to race and hunt. Her dream was becoming a reality. She'd always known what she wanted. She was confident, self-assured, and at times outspoken, never believing in keeping her opinions to herself. The majority of her time was spent in the stables, where she trained flat racers, and as St. Elmo's Fire's victory proved, she was quite good at it. Her mother's death from a respiratory disease struck Cora especially hard. Grief had overwhelmed her. She and her mother had been extremely close. Her death left her feeling empty and alone. Her passion for horses became her life, a way to escape her grief. Cora merged herself further into her horses. She would honour her mother by being the best at whatever she set her mind to. Now here she was, not so very many years later, being escorted by her father to the winner's area once again. "Move your arse! Move your bloody arse!" Sebastian Steele, Duke of Hightower, watched in fascination at the young woman standing at the rail, yelling and making a fool of herself. Fascinated, because he'd never seen a woman get so animated about a horse race. It was undignified, and certainly unbecoming of a lady. Where was her husband? Though women did attend horse races with their husbands, they never behaved like this. She appeared to be a peer, well-dressed and mannered, except for this outburst. Could it be her husband's horse she was carrying on about? She continued watching the race, cheering them on. In the sun, red hues sparkled off her mahogany hair. She wore a dark green dress with charcoal piping, along with a peplum jacket and skirt. The collar hugged her chin and was trimmed with black lace. The jacket closed with small black buttons on the front. He turned his attention from the dark-haired woman to the race, which was winding down. The horses were headed into the home stretch, and his own entry, Apollo's Gold, was proving once again to be a disappointment, holding at a good distance behind the winner. The stallion had shown great promise up until the last two races. Something was missing. He needed to send Apollo to someone who could salvage this horse's future before he ruined it.
"Better luck next time,"
Crispin Allgood, Earl of Yorkshire, said, clapping him on the shoulder.
"There isn't going to be a next time, if I don't figure out what's holding him back,"
Hightower grumbled.
"Perhaps you need a new rider. I switched riders the last race, and the results were no better. Something else is going on. Have you ever considered sending him off for training? Perhaps he needs a fresh pair of eyes guiding him. You're too close, Hightower. You've raised him from an orphaned colt. I understand the Duke of Dover uses one of his estates in Scotland, exclusively for training and breeding. His trainer's supposed to be excellent. You saw the result just now."
Hightower jerked his head to the rail. She was gone. He turned back to Allgood.
"Who's his trainer? Do you know?" "I can't recall offhand. Just heard he runs the Duke's entire operation there. And like I said, the man's excellent,"
Allgood replied.
"I need to make inquiries." "Indeed. Are we off to town? Or do you want to go to the stables first?" "Stables. Make sure Apollo is ready for the trip home. I think a week or two running the meadow might help his state of mind, while I contact Dover's trainer. Don't you think?" "I agree. After perhaps we can make our way to White's for a drink and an early dinner. I certainly could use a good snifter of brandy after this disappointment,"
Hightower said. Hightower's own stable was relatively small, with 3 generations of Irish thoroughbreds, some crossed with Arabians. His breeding lineage was becoming known. Apollo's Gold had been orphaned at birth, his mother dying shortly after having him. Hightower had personally taken an interest in maintaining the colt's feeding schedule at night, allowing the stable boys some much-needed time off. Many nights Hightower slept in the colt's stall. Now a 3-year-old, the flashy chestnut colt had proven he had what it took to race like the wind, until 2 races prior. Despite all the small changes with riders and feed, nothing changed. Apollo's Gold seemed more lethargic and uninterested. He merely went through the motions. If Hightower couldn't figure out what was going on with the colt, he would have to retire him from racing and find another use for him. Or worse yet, find another owner, though Hightower knew he could never part with the chestnut. He'd made him a promise that first night, as he fed the youngster in his stall, that they'd always be together. Before making any decisions, he would look into sending him off for further training. His friend was right. Though the youngster had the heart of a racer, Crispin was right. He was too close to the colt. It was said the Duke's farm employed a most unusual and competent trainer, who had led the Duke's horses to victory on the track. The trainer was also known to know horseflesh and breeding better than most, which could prove interesting. Perhaps he might learn something new from this man. Tomorrow he would make inquiries and see about visiting the Duke of Dover's training farm in Scotland. They climbed into Allgood's carriage, heading for White's.
"You said you couldn't tell me much about the Duke's trainer. Tell me what you've heard." Only that he's done remarkable things over the years, improving the Duke's bloodline. So much so, I hear the Duke sold a young coat to some European royalty recently for an obscene amount of money. GS, I believe, is what the fellow goes by. I'm not sure about a surname, but it'll come to me. I think I'll contact the Duke and make an inquiry about training. Excellent idea, because they might not be accepting outside horses right now. You might have to be scheduled. Precisely. Perhaps I can tempt the Duke to meet me at the farm and introduce me personally to his trainer. Do you know where it's located? Ogod smiled. It's located in Lanarkshire, in the Scottish lowlands. I do not have the interest you do in horses and racing and such. I'm sure you can find out easily enough. Simply make some inquiries. Tattersalls might be a good place to start. I understand some of the Duke's lesser quality horses go through there. Sounds like Dover keeps everything rather exclusive and quiet.
The carriage came to a stop in front of White's. A footman opened the door to let them descend the carriage. Hightower followed his friend. His interest was even more piqued now.
Do you have any plans for the evening? Ogod asked. Nothing that can't wait. Why?
A footman appeared and took their drink order after they sat down in a couple of leather chairs off to one side. Hightower ordered whiskey, and the Earl did the same.
I thought we might have steak here, and then proceed on to the Tortoise and Hare.
Ogod smiled. The Tortoise and Hare was a supposed gentleman's club, one that discreetly offered their clientele women to satisfy their needs when a wife or lover could not.
Hyacinth not at home?
Hightower asked with a smirk.
No. She's visiting her sister in Manchester. She won't be home for another fortnight. Really?
Ogod nodded.
Her sister is with child, and is about to give birth. It's her first, and Hyacinth thought she should be there for the blessed event.
Hightower took the glass from the footman, who returned with their drinks.
You really need to get yourself a mistress, rather than frequenting gentlemen's clubs, says the man who is celibate. I've just not found a woman worth keeping as a mistress. As far as your question about this evening, I'm afraid I'm going to have to pass. Not to my taste. What has gotten into you, Hightower? You've gotten to be quite boring, you know.
His friend grinned and upended his drink. Knowing his friend's fondness of whiskey and brandy, Hightower motioned for a footman and ordered 2 steaks, along with more drinks. He didn't need to accompany Crispin tonight. The last time he did, it took him a week to recover fully. If it hadn't been a marriage arranged by both families, Hightower was sure his friend would have never married. At least not yet. Crispin enjoyed whoring around far too much, which was why he had no mistress. A mistress would be too confining, and he had a wife for that. A couple of hours later, after drinks, dinner, and brandy afterwards, Hightower called it a night. He left his friend at his carriage and found a hansom to take him home. He wanted to see how the colt fared. He had been brought to the mews behind his London home rather than make the trip up to the estate, as Hightower was thinking a good night's rest was more of what Apollo needed. The streets were busy in this section of Westminster. Carriages lined the street, taking their occupants to the theatre or social affairs. He was thankful to be on his way home, though his country estate was more to his liking. Coming to town was a necessary evil, and he would just push through it. As long as he limited the social engagements he attended, the more likely he might be left in peace. The only way he saw he could avoid the anxious mothers wanting to make sure their daughters got an introduction with him, or better yet, that he would dance with one of them. He knew he needed to marry at some point, start a family, and produce the next Duke of Hightower. But he would not be forced by his sisters or anyone else into marrying. Marriage would be on his own terms. Beatrice, Theodora, and Matilda were all still single, and all were of marriageable age. What he needed to be doing was seeing they were married first. Then he would put himself out on the marriage mart. He arrived back home, met by his butler, James, who took his hat, gloves, and greatcoat. He went down the hall to the library. A book about the Roman Empire sat where he'd left it the night before. The book was dry reading, but his fascination with ancient civilizations held his attention, letting him immerse himself in some long-forgotten battle. Pouring a brandy, he settled onto one of the cities his mother had furnished the room with years ago. He took a thoughtful sip of the dark amber liquid before opening the book to where he'd marked it the night before. After reading and rereading the third page, Sebastian picked up the brandy and finished it off, not understanding why he was unable to focus. His mind kept going back to Apollo and the astounding loss the cult suffered earlier. Beyond that, he recalled the dark-haired beauty yelling at the rail. As enthusiastic as she was, he wondered if the horse belonged to her father or husband. The only other reason for her acting in such an unladylike fashion would be that she'd simply bet on the horse and had gotten carried away as the coat blew past all the others, winning by at least a half-dozen lengths. Apollo could do that easily. He was more than capable to outrun every horse he'd been against today. He just failed to deliver. Something was terribly wrong. And somehow, by hook or by crook, Sebastian was going to figure it out. 2. Hightower pulled the covers up over his head as the heavy forest green draperies opened, revealing a bright, sunny morning. Damn Titus. The majordomo knew not to wake him before 8, unless it was an emergency. An emergency constituted the house on fire, or some other dire and dreadful disaster. Anything else could wait until he awoke, dressed, read the newspapers, and took a light breakfast. Good God, man! This had better be good. I can assure you it is, Allgood replied, a mocking tone to his voice. Besides, you're wasting a perfectly good day lying about in bed. Knowing he'd get no peace from his friend, Hightower reluctantly sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Tell me. Tell you what? Whatever it is you find so damn important to wake me. Allgood flopped into a chair. I have information about the Duke of Dover's trainer for you. Titus entered the room, silently laying out Hightower's clothes. The man had been with the Duke since he attended Oxford, and by the look on his face, the majordomo was not pleased with Allgood's unannounced visit. Let me see. The Duke's trainer resides on his estate in Scotland, and is quite mysterious. I wouldn't say mysterious. The man simply runs a tight ship, and doesn't wish people, particularly strangers, coming to visit and disrupt his schedule. Hightower shook his head. Are you going to tell me anything new? If not, I'm going to finish dressing and go down to my study, where I'll write Dover a letter inquiring about putting Apollo in training with his trainer. Did I mention that the Duke is a cousin of my wife's? No, you did not mention that. How would that help me out? The corners of Allgood's mouth pulled up. I had completely forgotten they were related. Come on, are you going to make me drag this out of you? Hightower asked, as Titus finished with his cravat. Okay, let us not get testy, old man. I may have mentioned to Hyacinth's brother last evening your bad luck with the court, and you were looking to ship him off for training. That's when he reminded me he and Hyacinth were cousins of the Duke, and that he would be happy to send a letter of introduction on your behalf. That could be huge. I must thank him. You can do that tomorrow evening.
Peter has invited the Duke and his daughter to dinner at my home tomorrow. This is great news, especially since we've both heard how cautious the Duke is. I'm sure if he decides it, Apollo will find himself in Scotland in a matter of weeks. Problem solved. It certainly would be. Well, have you any appointments this morning? Correspondence to catch up on? I have no appointments, and going through my correspondence should take little time,
Hightower replied, arching an eyebrow.
What exactly do you have in mind? I thought we could go to White's for lunch, and then on to Tattersall's afterwards, Ogod said. That would be reasonable. I understand the Marquis of Leeds has brought a couple of thoroughbreds to Tattersall's. They're Irish, and the bloodlines are what I desire. I'd like to at least look.
Ogod headed to the door.
What are we waiting for? Let's go to your study so you can open your blasted correspondence. Then on to White's for lunch.
Shaking his head, Hightower followed his friend out of his bedchamber, leaving Titus to clean up. They entered his study, and while Hightower sat behind his desk to open his correspondence, Ogod found a book and was restlessly flipping through the pages as he sat in front of the small fire. Hightower noted his friend was easily bored. The book didn't hold his attention, but then Ogod had never been a ravenous reader. Even as far back as their days at Eton, Ogod had struggled with their reading assignments. Hightower was the exact opposite, loving nothing better than to spend a quiet evening at home reading, either in his library or study. He continued looking over his morning correspondence. There were invitations to a few balls and a musicale, but nothing overly important. There was only one ball out of 4 he wished to attend now, and the musicale wouldn't hold his interest. Most were performances given by eager mothers, wanting to see their daughters married to the highest-ranking peer they could muster. The trouble was most of the young ladies in question were poorly lacking in talent.
Are you going to attend any of the balls? His friend asked. Perhaps the Duke and Duchess of Liverpool's annual ball. I haven't decided.
Ogod smiled all-knowingly.
A good one to be seen at. Everyone who's anyone will be there.
A footman entered the room with a tray containing tea, along with toast and jam. Hightower rarely ate a large meal early in the morning. The footman set the tray down and began to place the newspapers on the corner of Hightower's desk.
Hand them to Lord Allgood. I'm sure the reading is far better suited to him than the book he's attempting to read.
Ogod set the book down and took the papers from the young man.
It's too early to be delving into such intense subject matter.
Hightower waited for the footman to leave. He rose from his desk to pour himself a cup of tea, leaving Ogod to pour his own.
I'm sure it is. Gossip can be so much more entertaining, don't you think? Not everything printed in the newspapers is gossip, you know.
Agreed, Hightower replied, picking up a piece of buttered toast. He really needed to do better about his eating habits. People waking him early and changing his routine didn't help. Hightower had always been amazed by how lackadaisical his friend could be about his business affairs. Ogod had plenty to divert his attention, but seemed to need more time to play than he did. The hours and hours his friend had spent working on some major projects when his father had been alive were to be commended. It was either one of two ways with his friend. He was either on top of whatever had his attention, or he showed a huge lack of interest, acting quite bored for having been taken away from fun and games.
Did you know Lord Keller was seen leaving one of those gaming houses? Really? Which one? It does not mention the actual name of the establishment, only that it's near Grosvenor Square, which means it most likely must be the Three Horsemen. It's the only place I know, have heard of, in that vicinity. I'm sure. Anything else noteworthy going on?
He asked Ogod as he returned to his desk to sip his tea, finish his correspondence. If he could get his friend to quiet down, he'd get through this a lot faster.
I know you're not interested, though if you're ever going to find a wife, you might start paying attention.
Sebastian shook his head.
We've been over this numerous times. Stop trying to marry me off.
August arched a brow.
Sebastian, what you need to do is hire yourself a man to take care of the more mundane areas of your life. Give yourself a chance to live. I am living, Crispin. Perhaps not in the manner you would, but I'm content. And should I ever need assistance, Titus is quite capable of helping me out.
August didn't answer. Their conversation long forgotten as he turned to a new page in one of the newspapers. Hightower knew to finish up his tasks quickly. If he let Crispin continue, it would be a late lunch they enjoyed. The next few minutes were relegated to relative silence. If one could consider the regular sound of a newspaper's pages being turned, or the hefty sighs that filled the room on occasion.
Why don't you pour yourself a cup of tea and stop moaning like an old lady? I promise all that noise isn't going to motivate me into going any faster. I'll have you know, I don't moan. At least not unless it involves a member of the opposite sex.
Sebastian put his hand up.
Enough! I really am not in the mood to listen about your sexual exploits.
The room remained silent until Titus entered the room. Hightower handed the major domo the finished correspondence and set his pen aside. No words were exchanged between the two men. Titus had been in his employ long enough that he knew most everything about the Duke.
I've done all I can do. If you've finished with your gossip sheets, we can leave for White's.
August quickly folded the newspaper and rose from the chair that he'd been occupying.
Thank goodness. I was afraid you were going to be at least another hour, and we might have to wait. I have no doubt you do your best to make sure we don't wait. Yes, I hate to wait, especially when it involves a good meal. If you don't quit your ways, you're going to end up like your father, Crispin,
Hightower muttered. August's late father had been known to overindulge quite frequently. He had been prone to bouts of gout, and Lord knew it helps. Crispin tried, and for the most part, walked a straight line at home. Whenever Hyacinth was away, it was as though some other animal was unleashed, which led to some nocturnal activities not even Hightower could stomach.
I know. You, my friend, need to lighten up. Acting so dowdy you will never find a wife. You'll run off all the young ladies. As you keep harping about, can we please change the subject? To what? Are you still going to those fights?
August nodded with a smile.
Yes, though my wife has tried to convince me not to partake. Is it working? No. I find it an excellent way to relax.
Hightower bit back a laugh.
I can assure you I could find something far more entertaining to find to relax. Such as a horse ride, most likely. Why not? Beats getting beat up, he replied.
He and Crispin moved on to Tattersalls after a large lunch at White's, complete with whiskey and wine. Sebastian honestly did not know how his friend could hold his alcohol so well this early in the day. He only partook during the day if it were regarding business or extremely cold. Consuming alcohol during the day for pleasure was not in his make-up. It made him sleepy. And then a nap was what he preferred to do. His days of being a rakehelm were over. He'd put that time in his life behind him for his sisters. They took their time looking at what was being offered. The mares, along with one young stallion from the Marquis of Leeds' farm, caught his eye. They were magnificent Irish thoroughbreds. Adding at least one of the mares to his fledgling herd might be wise. The mare he was interested in was a deep red chestnut with a white stocking on the back leg and a white sock on the opposite front.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?